Chaney was not as alarmed about the cultural effects of the 1960s as Pentagon is, or as Karl wrote, because he does think that the feminist movement was a good movement after he's married to Lynn. He has, as everyone knows, a daughter who is gay and has a child. And he's proud of what his daughter is doing. One works for Coors, one works for the State Department. But he did say that he's a lot more conservative now, and that's my own judgment based on my knowledge of that.
What do you think changed in the 90s?
No, it's not a significant why he become more conservative and has gone deeper into his own bunker is the best way of describing it. My own personal judgment is the 9/11 change. That happened on their watch. They were not prepared for it. And that he sees only the dark underside. That happened on their watch. They were not prepared for it. And that he sees only the dark underside. That happened on their watch. They were not prepared for it. And that he sees that happened on their watch. They were not prepared for it. And that happened on their watch. They were not prepared for it. That happened on their watch. They were not prepared. That happened on their watch. They were not prepared for it. And that he sees only the dark underside of Islamic rage and very little relief for it. So that's what I believe. But I don't know. I know a number of his very close friends, and they're as mystified as a lot of other people are about why he so shut down, because if he stayed in the House, even though he'd been a very conservative congressman, he had the ability to work across the aisle. A lot of people thought he would be Speaker at some point. I've had these conversations with him. He's read what I've written about him, and I've written all that about him. And he sent me a very nice note the other day. He said he was happy to have this story in my book. So he's comfortable with who he is.
Yes. That's true.
My question to you is with respect to Vice President Dick Chaney and 9/11 and how you felt that changed him quite a bit. I think in your statement you said that kind of caught him off guard. Yet, as it seems now, it seems that there was numerous warnings with respect to 9/11 before it actually happened, including John Ashcroft actually stopping all commercial flight starting in July on that date. Also, Senator Willie Brown was asked not to fly on 9/11 on September 10th. And also, officials at the Pentagon were asked not to fly on 9/11. There is a certain whistleblower that has actually been gagged by John Ashcroft that has vowed to come forward. And I'm wondering, sir, if you can step one more time and bring one more great story to the American people by interviewing her directly. Her name is Sibel Edmonds. This is the Turkish translator that has come forward with information stating that there was mistranslation with respect to pre-9/11 intelligence, and that there are internal elements within the FBI that actually suppressed numerous investigations pre-9/11. So I'm wondering, I'm digressing here. I'm wondering.
There's a question in there somewhere.
Yeah, the question is this, sir. Are you willing to bring Sibel Edmonds' story to light? Again, this is the FBI translator that's been gagged by John Ashcroft.
Would you repeat that?
Sibel Edmonds, are you familiar with the name?
Am I willing
to interview this Turkish source?
FBI translator, yes.
Yeah.
There are so many levels of conspiracy about what happened.
Please, this is not a conspiracy theory, sir. I mean, I'm not.
Who do you want me to interview? I'm sorry, I'm
yes, Sibel Edmonds, a real FBI translator, sir, that was there on 9/11, that has come forward, and that's actually been heard by numerous senators, and that have actually said that her story should come out.
Okay, we got that. As I say, Prescott, send me an email and we'll consider it. But yeah, I think that's a hard question to answer on the spot like that. I need to know more about it. Yeah. Next question.
Thank you again for coming here, Mr. Brokaw. I'm a baby boomer. I'm on the very tail end of the baby boom days, and my father also served in World War II. He was part of the Great Generation. He was in World War II, Korea, and Vietnam. Silver Star winner, 2 Bronze Stars, very highly decorated veteran. I followed him into the military myself, and I served in the United States Navy. And I got out and I became a computer geek. And the wonders of the internet age, you mentioned a little bit of people staring at a box and getting their information from the box, and it does make it a lot easier to find things. There is one thing on here that everybody here can look up, and that is you can go to YouTube and look up these 2 things, 3.5 trillion and the word pentagon. And this goes to the story, I think was released on September 10th or 11th by Donald Rumsfeld. $3.5 trillion were unaccounted for by the Pentagon. Now, when 9/11 happened, you were talking about Dick Chaney and how it changed him and everything. Many of us were watching the C-SPAN interviews, and Norman Mineta talked about his famous testimony of witnessing the petty officer, conversation with the petty officer and Dick Chaney, where he was telling him about Flight 77 being 70 miles out, 60 miles out, 40 miles out, 30 miles out, but the order still stands, sir. And Dick Chaney whipped his head around and said, "Have you heard anything to the contrary? The orders stand." So the question is that $3.5 trillion that were accounted for, the investigators, all 32 of them, were in a meeting in the Pentagon, and they were all killed when Flight 77 hit the Pentagon. Why, if they knew that the plane was coming from 70 miles out, didn't they call the Pentagon to evacuate those people? They had plenty of time, 15, 20 minutes before it happened. They could have gotten all those investigators out, and we have right now $3.5 trillion that nobody's picked up the ball on, no one's investigating. That's U.S. taxpayer dollars, sir. So I'm wondering, do you think you could bring another great story to light?
I think there was great chaos. You have more certainty now in hindsight than they had at the time about where the plane was going and how much time they had to respond to it. Don Rumsfeld was stunned when the plane hit the Pentagon. I've actually talked to commercial pilots who said that was the hardest hit of the day because it was a low profile and they didn't think that was going to happen. There was chaos in the skies. They didn't know whether that one was headed to the Pentagon, and they didn't know what happened to the United States.
Pentagon. The day before 9/11, Secretary of Defense Donald Rumsfeld declared war, not on foreign terrorists.
The adversary is closer to home. It's the Pentagon bureaucracy.
He said money wasted by the military poses a serious threat.
In fact, it could be said that it's a matter of life and death.
Rumsfeld promised change, but the next day, the world changed. And in the rush to fund the war on terrorism, the war on waste seems to have been forgotten.
My 03 budget calls for more than $48 billion in new defense spending.
More money for the Pentagon when its own auditors admit the military cannot account for 25% of what it already spends.
According to some estimates, we cannot track $2.3 trillion in transactions.
$2.3 trillion with a T. That's $8,000 for every man, woman, and child in America. To understand how the Pentagon can lose track of trillions, consider the case of one military accountant who tried to find out what happened to a mere $300 million.
We know it's gone, but we don't know what they spent it on.
Jim Minery, a former Marine turned whistleblower, is risking his job by speaking out for the first time about the millions he noticed were missing from one defense agency's balance sheets. Minery tried to follow the money trail, even crisscrossing the country looking for records.
The director looked at me and he says, "Why do you care about this stuff?" It took me aback, you know. My supervisor asked me why I care about doing a good job. So
he was reassigned and says officials then covered up the problem by just writing it off.
They got to cover it up. That's where the corruption comes in. They've got to cover up the fact that they can't do the job.
The Pentagon's Inspector General partially substantiated several of Minery's allegations, but could not prove officials tried to manipulate the financial statements. 20 years ago.